Hello, welcome to Sage X3 quick video tutorials. Today's session I'm going to talk about purchase invoicing element carrying dimensions. So I'm going to discuss regarding the setup of the purchase invoicing element, default dimensions, and a short demo to explain how the invoicing elements with dimensions get carried over from the PO to the receipt or to the invoice. So let's take a quick look at the setup of the default dimensions and the purchase invoicing elements, and then we'll run through a scenario. Okay, so first I would like to show you the invoicing element that I'm going to use for this example. So let's go to the purchase invoicing elements function, GES PFI1, and it's under setup purchasing invoicing elements. So the invoicing element I'm using here is freight charges, and that's the standard setup. I didn't change anything here, and the default dimensions for the invoicing elements can be set under the analytical grid. So you can either set up a default dimension here, or you have other various ways that you can set up a default dimension for the invoicing element depending on the default dimension setup. So what happens when we set it up here is that when you create a PO based on your default dimension setup, the dimension used on this screen will be used on the PO, and then the receipts and the invoices. Alright, so let's go to the default dimensions setup. So default dimension setup, it's on the setup financials, accounting interface and default dimensions. So that's GES CDE. So I have used the selection menu to filter the required invoicing element default dimension setups. So there are three. So one is POV, is for purchase invoice elements, PTV is for the receipts, and PIV is for the invoice. Alright, so let's begin with the POV, purchase invoicing element. So for purchase invoicing element, I'm using only one dimension type, CCT, and the cost center or the dimension for cost center is coming from the supplier. So the supplier record that is used on the purchase order has to have a dimension value. Otherwise, you will have a blank dimension on the invoicing element. So for supplier, we also wants to make sure the identifiers are correct, right? So you can test that out first to make sure if it works fine or not. And then for the receipts, the dimension is going to come from the source document. So the source document of the receipt would be the purchase order. So we already have the PO that has the supplier dimensions, and then on the receipt it's going to use the dimensions on the PO. Okay, so the source document, the formula here has to be PVF. PVF is the PVCR FOOT table, purchase document footer element table. So this table will get populated with the information relevant for the PO, and then when you create the receipt, it'll look up that information and then populate the dimensions on the receipt. Alright, and then finally the PIV is the invoicing element, and that is also, I'm using the source document. So here the source document is the same, PVF. All right. So once you have those setup defined, we can go ahead and run a quick scenario to see how it works in the system. So I've also added the invoicing element on the supplier record. I can just quickly show you that. So for NA009 on the Financials tab, you can see the analytical grid. I have the cost center dimension type, dimension SVPL-001 populated. Okay, so once we have the setup in place, let's create a purchase order. So for the purchase order, I'm going to use the site NA023 and order date, supplier is NA009, and then just tab through the lines and enter the product. And the invoicing element that we are going to use on the purchase order, which is the freight, that is number 2, and the amount $25. And so you can see for cost center, the SCPL-001 is defaulting from the supplier on the PO. So generate the PO. Okay, next let's go and create the receipt. So for the receipts, I'm using the same site, receiving site, and the supplier, and select the order. So you can see the invoicing element defaults from the purchase order and the dimensions as well. So create the view, so the receipt. And then finally, let's create the invoice. So the invoicing site is NA023, invoicing type is INV, supplier is NA009, and then the document number, we can just give some reference to that, and then we need to select the receipt. So receipt ending in 91. So when we select the receipt, we need to enter the amount for the invoicing element, the invoice. Then if you scroll to the right, you can see the dimension for the cost center is defaulted from the source document. So you can generate the invoice, and then we can post the invoice. Okay, so invoice is posted, and let's take a look at the accounting document. Let's give some time for the system to generate the posting for the invoice. Journal entry is here, and then let's go and take a look at the lines. So you can see the invoicing element $25, and then the other lines you have for the invoice. Alright, so that's all I wanted to show you today. One more thing, like I just wanted to mention is, like, if you are using a different default dimension for the invoicing element, please test the setup as well as the scenario before you try it on your live system. I hope this is beneficial for you, and I will see you next time on a different video on a different topic.